Hello, it's Thursday. So today I thought it could be fun to spin some wheels. So we are going to spin a fruit wheel and an animal wheel and mash them together to make a fruit animal themed dragon. Yeah, so in order to do that we are going to need a couple of wheels. And we are going to start by spinning... Ooh, do we want to do fruit or animal first? I think we'll start with the fruit wheel. Okay, it's spinning. Let's see what happens. Cherry, okay. I think last time we got a banana leopard, so cherry is nice and different from that. I can think of like some distinctive characteristics of cherries. Okay, and now we need an animal. And I've specifically tried to put kind of like interesting and odd animals on this list, so. Oh, okay, it's the shoebill. That's gonna be kind of tough. All right, so we need to make some kind of combination of a cherry and a shoebill. For those of you who don't know, this is a cherry and this is a shoebill. These birds freak a lot of people out and I can kind of see why. Personally, I kind of think they're cool though. Okay, we're going to need to sketch about this, I think. All right, well, let's start with the easiest part of this prompt, which is probably the cherries. Don't know about you, but when I think about cherries, I always think about them being in like little pairs of two. Don't really know how we're going to tie that into the bird today, but we'll see how we go. So thin little stem, big round fruit. And that is to be juxtaposed with the shoebill. I'm just going to take my time here and explore some of the shapes of the bird. The cherries are pretty obvious, but the bird itself, I really need to be like overly familiar with what the shapes are, so I know how I can potentially manipulate them to join the two together. Don't actually know what their feet look like because they tend to be depicted in water. Okay, so that is our nemesis for today, this big beaked fellow. Okay, so the overwhelming vibe I'm getting from my exploration here is that we're gonna have to try and create something that is like an innocent little cherry that you've brought home from the grocery store and then it decides it wants to eat your whole family. And I think the quintessential shoebill has to have the very intense, creepy expression, unfortunately, because I'm sorry, these shoebills, they are the stuff that villains are made of. So I am thankfully going to be able to like cushion some of this with maybe some dragon features just to help me out here. But I think that quintessential shoebill comes down to this beak, a heavy evil eyebrow, which is fine. I do kind of heavy brows on my things anyway. And it has to have kind of like a little tuft at the back of the head, I think, as well. In terms of cherries, as long as I incorporate some kind of degree of like round and red, I'm going to hit the challenge. Cherries are kind of a nondescript fruit, I think. Like, they're tiny little stone fruit, but that's something that you know intellectually. It's not something you necessarily spot. Just stringing a bunch of cherries onto something feels like it's skirting the challenge a little bit. So the next thing to do now that I've kind of worked out what each of the two prompt items is, to try and like mash them together. So I think that we need some dragony type features to kind of help us along here. Now, because we're dealing with a shoebill, I think like a wyvern type dragon might be the key here because they're kind of like a big head and a neck down into like a tail. Dragon Anatomy 101. They have their wings and they've got legs, but they have no like forearms. We've got no quadrupeds here today. Now, I think every dragon I've ever made has been a quadruped, but that's because that's my preference. But given that we're dealing with a shoebill type of base today, I think the time for a wyvern has come. I don't know how this is going to be cute. If it can't be cute, hopefully it can at least look cool. I'll settle for cool. So starting out with like the rough base of a wyvern here, but where I would normally go for like a thin whippy tail, I'm going to try and like follow the lines of what the bird itself has and just sort of exaggerate them a little bit. I'm giving it kind of a ducked under head. There's not a lot of cherry here. We've got a little bit of dragon and we've got a little bit of bird, but no cherry yet. Cherry could just come in at the colours, but again, that feels a little bit like a cop-out. I kind of want to incorporate it a little bit more than that. Horrifying. This thing is scary as hell. Okay, so I really like what we've come up with here in regards to the head, just the overall vibe. I love this idea of the cherry stems as these spine details and even maybe some little cherry blisters on there. This guy is already turning out pretty large. And so I'm gonna have to try and rein myself in here, but that means I can cheat a little on the wings and I'm sure you guys will forgive me. Loving the, like even the tail detail, though it might end up like flicking outwards instead of down. I haven't decided yet. Yeah, I think this is what we're aiming for. That's so cool. Ah, dang it. There's no way I'm gonna be able to live up to this. So we have our sketch that's setting like the vibe that we want for our finished creation, but I do still need to like break it down into pieces so I know what to make. So first we've got a big round head that we'll probably try and make into, we can kind of cheat the under neck area a little bit here because the beak will cover up a lot of it. So this piece, probably need to do the eyebrow as a separate piece as well. So we can maybe just make a round. Where it joins into the body at the back is super important. A nice puffed chest. A relatively solid base. Again, that's coming more from the bird than the dragon. And curl it down into a tail. So we want all of that to be all one piece. That's it from the side. The beak is quite a specific shape. So we need like a top beak that's kind of like that, but from the front it'd be very large beak. And we would need like the scoop for underneath as well, the underbeak, bottom beak. We're going to need some kind of eyebrow piece because there's no way I'm getting that kind of defined brow ridge without making it as a separate piece. So we'll give him a little hat, a little swoosh of a hat. The cherry stems for along the back are almost just like a long chained picot type of detail. So that's just a sew-on detail, that's easy. And those little blisters might just be embroidered on even. We want big swoopy wings, but they are large, feathery, bird-ish is the thing there, type of wings. So I'm thinking, like even bird wings have like the bat structure, it's just you cover them with feathers. So I'm thinking we could do like some layers of like feather, and they are wyvern, so they will need to have the claw at the finger joint because they are actually acting as arms. But then we could possibly get away with just like webbing, or if I'm feeling super motivated still at that part of the project, we could potentially do them completely feathered as well. So build those up in some layers. Again, they're basically just ruffly layers. Those aren't complicated pieces. They're lines with ruffles that look really cool when you layer them up. We're going to need some chest plating details, which again are just a bunch of rectangles that we can just layer on up. Make them to fit, make them to scale, make them look real nice. We might need a little detail for the end of the tail. Just thinking like a little, I don't want him to look like I've lined up a bunch of literal cherries down his spine, but like taking the individual details of the stems and like some of the little blisters I think could look really cool in combination. And then the legs are the only thing I'm still a little bit on the fence about. But again, we might do him in like a flying pose. So he'd need like 3 claws at the top and a claw at the bottom, and then just like a swoosh of a leg to attach. So yeah, we have our plan. I'm gonna go find some yarn. Okay, well, it's cherries, so I'm feeling like we should go with like reds, right? But then it's also dragon, so I am allowed to contrast it a little bit. Now, I actually really like the idea of using like black cherry colors. So like that's like really dark red, maybe a little purple mixed in. I know I tend to do purple dragons a lot, but I think that, what's opposite red on the color wheel? It'd be green. Gross. This is not a Christmas wyvern. Anyway, I'm gonna rummage through and see what colors I like for this. So I went back and forth a few times, but I've ended up in kind of a strange place here where Shoebill's coloration is actually like a dark blue-gray, and then their beak is kind of like a yellowy tan color. So I do want to like not lose all of that completely just to the cherry coloration, but I do think that like red needs to feature pretty prominently here. So I have like the main colors blocked out, but I might just have to do a little bit of digital testing. Like a little bit of coloring in to just like really nail down exactly how I want this to look, because I'm feeling a little hesitant, and once I pick up a hook, it's a lot of hard work to change colors at that point. Okay, that was actually really helpful because I've ended up going in kind of the opposite direction to the direction I thought I was going to go, because I thought I was going to do red with blue accents, and then just as I was colouring it in, I realised that going with the more traditional like bluish grey as the base and doing red accents didn't feel as cheesy as I thought it would, and I actually didn't mind how contrasty the two were together, but I suppose we'll find out if I still think that way in a minute. So the only problem I have now is which of them matches the sketch better, because it's kind of a mix between these two. It's a shame that you can't really mix yarns properly. The blue feels really cartoony to me, but I do think it's closer to the one I drew, but this feels right. Gut is telling me to go with this one here. So we're going to go with, there's no colour listed on the label. I think it's sage or something like that though. So yeah, we have our yarn. So now I have my yarn selected, I could start making the pieces. And I started with the head and body piece, just because it was like such a main chunk of this particular creature. It was going to dictate a lot of the sizing of everything else, and it meant that I could make everything else to scale with it. So I started at the top of the head and worked up a bulb. Now you might not be able to see it, but I specifically exaggerated 4 distinct corners at the top of the head when I was working up the shape. Shoebill and square just kind of felt like the right combo. I couldn't avoid putting the eyes in, but doing it this early in the design with no pieces to help line it up was a little stressful. I let my concept sketch and reference images guide me and hoped for the best. Continuing the piece, I tried to exaggerate the puff of the chest and the slope of the back. I was definitely leaning more towards the shoebill in this shaping, but bulking it up a little into wyvern territory. And I may have gotten carried away with the bulking. Okay, so he's a little chunkier than the picture, because our little wyvern definitely turned out chunkier than initially planned, but I think I can make it work. The eyebrow was just a little hat. There was definitely some pressure to use layers to make sure my guesstimation of where the eyes needed to be looked correct. It added just that little zip of stress to my day. Delightful. I wanted to tackle the beak next. And I started with the bottom beak, as strangely that actually had to be more proportionate with the head than the top beak did. And it is just a flattened little scoop. Then the upper beak is basically the exact same pattern as the lower beak, just with a picot at the tip, and it's 2 stitches wider. I also added some extra stitches at the base so that it would fit more comfortably under the eyes. The original plan was to make separate panels for the belly, but I pivoted and decided to make it as one large panel. And I used surface crochet to break it up into smaller pieces. It came out a little bit chunky, but making it like this ensures a uniformity of stitch and space that I very much enjoy. For the cherry stems, I wanted them as thin and spindly as possible, so instead of using a chain, I worked over a long tail. This allows for very thin pieces, and for both yarn tails to end up on the same end, so I could hide them more easily. While most of the cherry details were going to be embroidered on, the tail cherries needed to be a bit more prominent. It was an interesting challenge to make them both small enough and big enough, but 5 stitches around seemed to do the trick. The wings were a major feature, but I was still going to cheat the details a little bit. I started with a large blue base piece, building in feather details on the edge as I went. My days of making individual feathers might not be over, but they're sure not today. For shaping, what you are seeing there is a nifty use of single crochet 3-togethers to create that bend while keeping all of my rows running in the direction I wanted them to go. Then I just needed some ruffles in my mid-red and bright red. I was worried they were becoming too thick, but both colours did need to be present. Finally, I made another blue piece using picots for the feathers. Now, this was to help blend the straight edge of the red pieces and to help hide the stitching where I had to sew it all together. Oh, and a tiny yellow claw for the fingertip. The legs and feet were the hardest piece for me in this project. I just was having a really hard time working out what they were actually supposed to look like. I ended up deciding to go more wyvern than bird, but then I started by making them entirely in yellow and they looked way too much like regular bird feet. I ended up frogging back and I tried again with just the toenails in yellow, and I think they look a little bit more dragon that way. Then I just worked up a little bulb for a thigh. And I ran into a familiar problem. I'm all out of pins, but we are nearly done here. I just needed to whip up a second leg and all of the pieces for a second wing. Now, I did forget to make the finger claw here, but I'll fix that later during assembly. Okay, so now I have all of my pieces made. Still looking a little bit more bird than wyvern, but I'm doing my genuine best. The time has come to assemble, and I think a lot of the details are going to be added as I start to assemble it as well. Like, for example, where we've put the stems down the spine, I also want to take time to add a bunch of like little tiny kind of cherry-like clusters. I'm actually thinking I'm going to use the brighter red for them and maybe mix them in with that darker red and just maybe do a little combo of them. Honestly, the stitching on of the stems and all of those little clusters is probably going to take the next year of my life. But yeah, we are nearing the finish line now. So all we have to do is sew them together. And I've been trying to find a good pun for it because like it's a shoebill cherry. And so like all of my notes have been labeled with sheberry. You guys let me know if you come up with something better, and I will let you guys know if I come up with something better before the end of the video. And there is our finished shoebill crossed with a cherry-inspired dragon. And I'm so pleased with the idea to make it a wyvern type creature. It just sort of lent itself so nicely to the bird aspects of this. However, I am a little worried that it's come out a little bit more bird than dragon, but you guys can let me know in the comments how I did. There's still no good puns for what we call it. But so I guess sheberry it is. But yeah, that's it for this week. Okay, bye. Grasping claws, and maybe that's what my problem is. It's the fact that what I'm picturing here is a bird that, or a predator that attacks from the sky, whereas shoebills, I'm pretty sure, are more of a wader. So it's more like, oh, we're making it out of cherries. Cherries can be made into wine. It's a wine vern. Is that something? I don't think it is. I'm sorry. So it's currently sheberry. Yeah, because like Cheryl doesn't have the same kind of ring to it. Neither does like Cherry Bill. Yeah, we're gonna have to work on it a little bit, I think.